And on the topic of approaching women and talking to women, we were chatting the other day about, do you have to be a dick to pull women? Do you have to be the bad guy to be able to attract and to keep women? What's the saying? It's treat them mean, keep them keen. What's your take on that? Do you think you have to be a dick to pull women?
I think there's a balance. I don't think you have to be. I think there's a balance between, like, I would be quite cheeky, but there's a difference between being cheeky and, like, being a dick. I do think that if you come across as, the problem is I think a lot of people get confused with what is nice, dick, and needy. And I think that's where men come across. They don't realize it, but the woman takes nice as needy sometimes. So I think that's where the misconception comes in, because you're being nice, but you're sending signals of neediness because you're maybe replying too fast. You're maybe prioritizing her too much. And that's not being a dick, not doing that. It's just a case of, like, you need to be self-sufficient. Absolutely. Versus a lot of men aren't. And then I think that comes across that they're looking for happiness, they're looking for fulfillment through her, and they're being nice about it, but that comes across as needy, whereas me being nice would be me replying to you once every 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, I always would have been, for me, like T and I spoke about this. I put up a reel about it, and I said, personally, I don't think you should be a dick to women. I was a dick back in the day when I was 17, 18. I would have lied, let on, and treated people like shit, and that came back to bite me in the ass down the line. And now, as I reflect and look back on that, I realised that was child's play. And did that maybe attract women at the time? Potentially. But that's never going to, one, attract the right person, and two, it's never going to sustain. It's never going to transition. It's never going to transpire into a happy long-term relationship, in my opinion.
I've had women where, whenever I was younger, like 6-7 years ago, where just before I went in a long-term relationship, and I would have treated them like a dick for like 6 months, like just dick. And then I would have started getting a little bit of feelings towards them, because time moves on, sex is happening, you become more emotionally tangled. And then I noticed when I eased off in the dick front, they start to disengage from you.
Absolutely.
Because they're emotionally attached to that dickhead, and it's not a case of who you're pretending to be, it's a case of there's some reason that they're finding that attractive, and they haven't dealt with that, and the problem is you're going to struggle to have a meaningful long-term relationship. Because I remember sort of not flicking mode, but almost being like, fuck, I'm going to go long-term with this female. And then as I eased off, I was like, I can feel her backing out.
Yeah.
Like, I could feel her attraction to me. And then as soon as I flick dick mode back on, straight away all over you. And you're sort of like, it turned me off completely then, because I was like, I don't want this at all then. Because I was like, this is going to be shit. So it's interesting, because there's still females like that the whole way up. I don't care what anyone says. And you'll notice they go for dickheads throughout, and they don't actually have a cop on. That's what they're like, oh, I always fall for dickhead. Like, that is on you 110%, and there's some reason underlying there that you're maybe not addressing. Which is
common denominator. Absolutely.
Exactly.
But again, people want what they can't have. And in my personal opinion now, like, again, we spoke like about being cheeky with something. Like, that's how I would have been back in the day. Like, you had a bit of banter, you like cheeky digs into people. That's like flirting, having the crack.
That's normal.
But again, growing up, maybe you heard of it, maybe you hadn't. But like, again, I remember speaking with my mates about this. And some girls will be listening to this, being horrified. Push-pull method, and it's kind of what you spoke about there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like, it was a known thing when we were growing up, the push-pull method. So you would have lent in, given someone attention, and then as soon as you've got it, boom, you pull away, and for 24, 48 hours, and you just ghost. And it's really messing with somebody's emotions, but again, it's reeling them in, and then you're pulling away, and
it's called love bombing too, isn't it?
Love bombing,
gifts and all at the start, and then you fucking, as soon as you get them, like, then you hook out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because if a woman or a man's listening, this might be the first time you're hearing this, but that's tactics I would have used too. Like,
it's emotional manipulation, but that is how, like, again, how a lot of guys that are growing up, like, that was normal, and that is scary.
That is normal.
But I think when you grow up, especially as you develop a lot of self-worth and self-confidence, and you realize that I don't need another woman to be sufficient, that's what women find attractive.
And if a woman finds only the dick attractive, it's an insecurity of self-validation that they want that person to find them attractive and keep them, and their self-worth's going to be tangled up in getting you, or vice versa, you getting them. And I think it's interesting, because, like, I don't think you have to be a dick to pull women, but I think there's that fine line of, like, I think, for example, like with the way you talk about your relationship too, like one of the reasons like Tia will obviously find you attractive about being a dick is you're not being a dick, but you have set boundaries. And
I'm very firm.
yeah, and that's not being a dick, but that's an attractive trait because it's still like an authority stat. It's still a man stat because most females will want the man to have more masculine energy. So being firm on yourself, your standards, it's not being a dick, but technically some people from the outset would be like, well, he's not coming to see me on a weekend because he's working or something. But that's like a very, as much as that's annoying, and people will be like, that's him being a dick, that's a stern, attractive, firm to certain individuals.
Being a, yeah.
Not all females, but and then I think that in itself can be seen as like being a dick, and then where you actually lie and where your values, morals are. And I think as you age too, like I like to think of it like that most people tend to grow out of the phase and don't want that, but there's some people that don't have the emotional maturity of that and don't realize that their subconscious is driving their attraction. Because usually if you're attracted to something, like for example, like the reason most men like big tits is because obviously when you're younger, breast. The reason you want big hips is because they're good for childbirth. That's usually the trend. Do you know what I mean? Long hair on a female is seen as more attractive than short because that's shown as a sign of good fertility.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like subconsciously, if I goes to you, would you rather your female partner have short or long hair? Just straight off the bat, most men will go long. Even though some females are unreal with short hair and it's very attractive, it's more of a serious cut and it's more of a, it's just programmed into us. And it's interesting because you don't realize then subconsciously there are physical traits, but there's actual traits of an individual that you'll find attractive because maybe your parents showed them traits. It's like, for example, you'll see if I've noticed this with like friends and people I'd be close to that, like for example, like if they're a female and their mum wears the pants in the relationship, they assume that that's the way it should be. So they'll bring that prowess in to the relationship, and it's interesting because then they try and bring that dynamic in with a different man. It's all these different things, and you need to remember a lot of your sense of what a relationship should be is probably based off your mum and dad, which technically can be. It's just them figuring out their shit.
It's a good thing or a bad thing for some individuals.
Yeah, so like your sense of what a good relationship is can be like, oh, but my mum and dad have a long lasting marriage. But that was a different lifetime ago. That was also like, do they have the sex you want to have at that age? Do they have the lifestyle you want to have? Is there certain things they've done you won't get? And they all screw up for a different time, different morals, different values. But I think a lot of our perception initially of what a good relationship is biased off that without even realizing.
Yeah, no, I know I'd be the same. Like I would base that exactly the same way off my mum and dad. Like they've been married maybe 31 years, and like my dad would come home and he would say, like, he would still give my mum a kiss, he would call her beautiful, he would still go on date nights, and like in my head that bar is set there. Then like in my head I'm like, after 30 years I still want to be there.
A lot of parents, I can guarantee you, like listen to that would be like, fuck, like my parents have been on date night next time, or my dad, when's the last time I've heard my dad compliment my mum? And if it's one of the things where it's as simple as like, for example, like I do notice things that my dad does. He does a lot of small things, and I'm like, that shows caring, because obviously there's love languages and all that, but it's like, there are the small things. I'm like, that's where for me, that's where like, I'm like, that's how it is. It's built on the small things. It's not the big gestures and the big holidays. It's like, how often is he cooking you dinner? How often is he running you a bath when you don't ask? Or how often is he, making your life that little bit easier? Joe, like, is he doing the shopping for you? Is he doing cleaning? Like, when you go, does he do the iron? Stuff that he definitely doesn't want to fucking do, but he's just doing because he's like, I'm trying to make her. And then for me, it's like, right, that builds the relationship, Joe, layer by layer. It's not about who's doing what. Once it turns into tit for tat, that's a mess.
Yeah, so go ahead.
It's just interesting because like I've never thought about it like that to an extent.
I mean, for me, I always had this idea of like being in love with someone, like it has to be absolutely perfect and everything's romantic. And I mean, for now I've realized that, that's not what that actually is. It's, you try and make it as romantic as possible, but your partners, no, they're not perfect, but it's seeing that individual as someone that you're going to spend the rest of your life with.